Is Islam from God? For a Catholic, the answer is no, firmly no. But you could say all the same Vatican Council too, that Islam contains extraordinary values such as faith in a single God, the fact that Jesus is the Messiah, even if he doesn't, is that a man, etc. Yet, it contains rich values, but it also contains enormous heresies for a Christian, namely the negation of everything that specifies the message of Jesus, everything that is supernatural, starting with the fact that God was made man, that God is one God in three persons, infinitely love, and this love is called the Holy Spirit. The fact that it is possible to love God of charity, therefore as a friend, not just as a submissive servant, as a friend at heart, because God lowers himself towards man and uplifts man towards him. The fact that Islam denies the possibility for the friends of God on earth and in heaven to collaborate, to be the kings of the heart of God. Therefore, this communion of saints, which makes Catholics pray saints of heaven and angels because they work with God. For a Catholic, where does Islam come from? Because it has had enormous success. You could say that if it was so successful, then it was still a blessing from God. Christians cannot answer like that, but there is a prophecy which helps them, which is in the Old Testament. It is the prophecy of the descendants of Abraham. When we look closely at the text, we see that Abraham had two children. We think of Isaac. He is the one who is known because he appeared from the descendants of the woman, from the legitimate wife of Abraham, after the appearance of God in the form of the Trinity at the oak of Mamre. He is the one who inherited all the promises, but we forget that before Abraham, who was 80 years old, and because God's promise did not come, ended up taking the initiative to sleep with a servant called Agar, and a son named Ishmael was born. Ishmael was driven out by Abraham because Agar took himself for their heiress. But the fact remains that God blessed Ishmael and gave him prophecy, which are very clearly those of Islam, by saying it will be like a wild ass of man living in the desert. We know how Islam is indomitable, proud of his faith. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him. We know that everywhere where Islam arrives, there is this hostility which takes place because of pride. He will have bow, which means that it will be a warlike people, and it will impose itself on the land of its brothers. What Islam has done everywhere, starting with Eastern Christianity but also India, we see in Pakistan what it is, and God adds 12 kings will leave Ishmael, and then Ishmael will die. This therefore means that God obviously did not raise Ishmael or Islam, but after the fact blessed her. And what is the reason? Very simple. If ever there was only one religion, even that of Christ, that of love on earth, because of what man, priests, and faithfuls are to kill, to persecute those who do not think properly. It is because of human pride. It is not because of Christianity. And so God, to avoid this, as long as we are on earth, divide the world into 6, 7, 8 different groups. Islam does not lead to salvation, but as Vatican II shows, it contains provisions, preparations for salvation, to worship God as a humble servant. When we see that God at the hour of death wants us to be friends, it does not take us away from God. On the contrary, it prepares us to enter the gospel of God. What happens to Muslims humble at the hour of death when Christ shows himself to them?